Hello all. So these are my final thoughts on Vt4. After listening to Marwa, Imani, and Lindsay's discussions, I've kind of reflected upon my own arguments and come back here with my final thoughts. So I think there is a strong argument that ethical responsibility and scientific rigor are generally complementary rather than competing, and representative sampling and data governance and independent oversight all improve both the fairness and the reliability of biotechnological research. I think one point that added complexity for me was the question of feasibility, layered oversight, continued consent management, community involvement, and these are all valuable, but they require funding, staff, and long-term institutional support. That means ethical research cannot depend only on individual investigators making good choices. It must also rely on the institutions having and prioritizing ethical advancement in biotechnology and in research. So, essentially, institutions should provide the infrastructure that allows these choices to be implemented consistently. I think the discussion about racial representation almost made me think more specifically about psychiatric research. So I think it's important to distinguish race, which is largely a social category, from genetic ancestry, although the two can overlap in research data sets. Um, Kind of going along with Marwa's discussion points, psychiatric genomic studies have historically relied heavily on participants of European ancestry, and this affects the generalizability of the findings. In one schizophrenia study, uh, actually, sorry, I would rather not use that source. Um, but essentially, in psychiatric genomic studies across ancestries, it seems like most of the data is derived from Caucasian ancestries, which kind of leaves the other groups at a disadvantage, especially for like research leading to therapeutic uh, products or results. However, representation alone is not enough. The clinical phenotypes entered into psychiatric data sets may also reflect inequities. So, I think certain meta-analyses found that patients in the United States, black patients in the United States, were diagnosed with schizophrenia at much higher rates than their white counterpart patients, and structured diagnostic assessments did not fully eliminate the disparity. So that does not prove like an underlying biological difference, but more so it raises like ethical concerns on are um, uh, how symptoms are kind of analyzed in an ancestry stratified way, um, and how these individual groups are getting the care that they deserve or the care that they get. So I think this creates an important experimental design issue. Recruiting a more diverse cohort while treating every clinical diagnosis as equally valid could reproduce bias rather than correct it. Ethical and rigorous psychiatric research therefore requires diversity across the entire pipeline. Recruitment, culture-informed assessment, phenotype validation, ancestry-aware analysis, community participation, and equitable access to resulting benefits. Um, my position also has become a bit more nuanced regarding risk. So I do think a major potential benefit can sometimes justify accepting limited ethical risk, but only when the risk is necessary and transparent. So scientific benefit should not just justify concentrating risk in populations that have the least influence over how research is designed or used. The main insight I think I will carry forward is that inclusion is not achieved simply by adding more diverse participants. Research must also examine whether the categories, measurements, analytical tools, and governance systems themselves work equitably across populations. That is where ethical responsibility and experimental rigor become inseparable. Anyways, those are my final thoughts. I appreciate you all for listening, and I appreciate the discussions I've had this week. And I hope everyone the best of luck in the final weeks of the course.